Hey guys, today I'm down in San Diego driving the slightly more sensible, slightly longer range, and slightly more affordable ZDX from Acura. This is their first full electric car in the US, and I will warn you in advance, I don't have a lot of time with this model. If you want to know more about the ZDX, we have a full video on the Type S on the channel, but today we're taking a look at the A-Spec. This is the slightly less powerful model, 490 horsepower instead of 499 horsepower, just under 450 pound-feet of torque instead of nearly 550 pound-feet of torque. So torque is the biggest difference between the two models. You'll notice that there are some subtle changes to the front-end design. The Type S is basically everything dialed all the way up to 11. Other differences between this and the Type S include we don't have an air suspension in this model, and the Type S has a standard air suspension. We also have different wheels and tires. So the tires are a little bit narrower, 265 instead of 275 with tires. The brakes, they're a bit smaller as well. We don't get those big Brembo brakes that we find in the Type S. And that's basically the theme of the A-Spec versus Type S. It's everything dialed up to 11 in the Type S, everything dialed up to maybe 9.5 in the A-Spec. Charging still happens behind this little door right here. Still a CCS charge connector. We don't know when or if we might see the J3400 connector on this model. We know that the related General Motors EVs, they have committed to it, but they haven't really given us a timeline. And that's one thing we should probably address. This is based on the General Motors Ultium platform, but there are some important differences. It's related loosely to the Cadillac Lyriq, but interestingly, this is the only Ultium vehicle in this lineup to get the adaptive air suspension. Now again, this one does not have that. This is the A-Spec. So in the back, again, slightly different bumper treatment. A-Spec logo right there instead of the Type S logo. Still plenty of cargo area behind. If I go ahead and pop the hatch, you'll notice that we get a pretty big cargo area. No front trunk in any Ultium family vehicle in this particular platform set, but we do have a little bit of extra underfloor storage going on right there in that area. If you're wondering what's going on under the hood, let's go ahead and take a look under there. If you want an even longer range ZDX, this one has an EPA range of just over 300 miles. You can get nearly 320 miles if you choose the ZDX with the single rear motor. Gotta actually pop the hood. Of course, if you want to see under there, so let's go ahead and do that. This one is going to have a motor up front, but interesting twist. Even if you opt for the rear-wheel drive model, still no storage area, no frubby, no front cubby or anything like that under there, because it's not just the motor that lives under there. All of the charge electronics, the motor control systems, etc., all of that is under the hood, as is the crash structure. But it does come across as having a pretty long hood profile for something that's a dedicated EV platform. Let's go ahead and hop in and take this out of the road, because again, we don't have a lot of time with this ZDX, so let's just see how this drives. All right, let's get the ZDX out on the road. Probably the first thing you're going to notice is that instead of the Acura Hunt and Peck shifter, we have a column mount shifter. That's something that, you know, definitely gives me 1980s Oldsmobile vibes, but actually in a good way. I like a column shifter. It takes up less room, gives us more storage space in the middle of the vehicle, which is something that I'd rather have than a funky shifter or even a more racy style column or a console shifter there. ZDX visibility is actually pretty good, so checking out turning here at this light, actually pretty easy, and there's a lot of pep. Now, there's also a lot of heft. One complaint about Ultium in the past is that they're pretty heavy, but if we complete this U-turn and then I stab the throttle, we get a lot of power. We don't get as much torque as we find in the Type S, but the bigger difference seems to be between about 30 miles an hour and 0. So 0 to 30 is definitely slower. If we go down here to maybe about 40 miles an hour and then I punch it, we get up to 50 really pretty quickly. So passing power is excellent in the A-Spec. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to drive the rear-wheel drive model. That's the version that I was really interested in testing. Acura does not have any of those for us to sample just yet, but hopefully they will soon. Interesting twist is that the rear-wheel drive model is going to give you longer range and of course a solid rear power bias, but it's not actually going to be that much longer than this dual motor model, and that seems to be down to the motor design. We get the same heavy horsepower motor in the back and then more of an occasional use motor up front. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. The front motor is not going to be used for steady state driving. It's actually going to end up disconnecting itself electronically, but if you need extra power, then it's going to come on and really give you that extra oomph. Aside from that, this feels very similar to the last ZDX that I drove. Seats are pretty comfortable, the ride is definitely comfortable. We don't have the adaptive air suspension, but I think that they've tuned this suspension towards the rational luxury end of things. They didn't try and make it overly sporty, so it's not aggressively firm. I think it's decently comfortable. Not quite as comfortable as the air suspension Type S, but that's something that I've come to expect. Now, looking at the dashboard here for just a moment while we're looking around, you should know that we do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto available on this screen. Definitely a big difference between this and the Cadillac Lyriq, but the screens are not as big as some of the other Ultium family vehicles. So slightly smaller screens, definitely a different design, a little bit more Acura with this sort of tablet computer motif and that screen grafted onto the dashboard. I would love to see a bigger screen maybe in the future, but you know, that's just something you'll have to deal with. Lots of storage going on in the center console, just as you'd expect here, and lots of physical buttons for the climate control as well. At this point in time, we can't talk about real-world fuel efficiency. However, I was impressed with the Type S when we drove that out in Santa Barbara not that long ago. This is going to be a bit more fuel efficient. Obviously, it's going to have to get over 3 miles per kilowatt hour if you really do want to go over 300 miles. But keep in mind that EPA rating is based on a combined city highway cycle, and this is a relatively heavy EV, decently heavier than something like a GV70. But thanks to the bigger battery, it's going to go further. Now, you should know that a Tesla Model Y, it's going to go about as far as this, but it's going to have a smaller battery, and that's because it's a lot more efficient. And that extra efficiency in the Model Y is the main reason that it's not going to take as long to charge on a road trip, because there's simply less power that needs to be shoved into the battery to get you another 300 miles. Be sure and sound off in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the ZDX, especially about Acura's decision to build this in coordination with General Motors. For me, it makes a lot of sense, especially business sense, because it would not get the $7,500 tax credit if it was built in Japan, or even if it was built in the US and they weren't able to properly source all the battery components. And that's the bigger deal, is it's not just about assembling the battery in the United States for the tax credit anymore. It's about ensuring that none of the critical materials for the battery come from countries of special concern, i.e. China. And that is something that General Motors has been really dedicated to. So the initial sourcing for the Ultium components was never from China, because this was designed for full compliance with the tax legislation right from the very beginning. And it also, of course, helped Acura and Honda get the Prologue and the ZDX to market sooner than they otherwise would be able to, and help lower the price because of the synergies in manufacturing coordination between the two companies. Some folks are really going to be offended by that. If that's you, then, you know, just buy a different Acura product, because there are plenty of 100% Acura Acuras on sale in the US. If, on the other hand, you love your Acura dealer and you love the Acura service network and you want an Acura-styled vehicle, then definitely check out the ZDX, because I think this is prettier, at least to my eye, than the Cadillac Lyriq. I love the Lyriq's look, but I think I like this look just a little bit better. And of course, if you want an Ultium that's labeled with an Ultium logo, then you probably want that Cadillac Lyriq. But this is going to get features like CarPlay and Android Auto, and we know that the future does not have that in store for the Lyriq, probably when it gets a refresh. It does at the moment, but it's not going to in the future. Let me know what you think about that down there, and again, check out the full video on the Type S. That's already on the channel. See all of you later.